I'm Zoe. I'm a mom. That's a very weird job. You work crazy hours with unstable people. And I have 2 kids. The fastest way for me to explain that to you as a state of being is that having 2 kids is like constantly being hungover from a party you never got to go to. Like, the parents of more than one kid view the parents of only children the way the Navy SEALs look at the reserves. Like, we appreciate what it is you do, but we have seen shit that will change you. Stomach bug of 2015, I was there. Front lines. My 9-year-old threw up in the food court of a very nice mall. I would not have thrown up there, but he did. And as I'm processing that this is my life now, my 5-year-old yells at me and says, "You never let me throw up outside! Never!" I was like, okay. Not surprisingly, I got sick after that, because that's what happens. And I wound up in my doctor's office with my kids, no sitter. And as I'm waiting, the secretary calls me over and she says, "Excuse me, we actually don't allow children in our waiting room." And I said, "Well, that's something to let people know in advance, isn't it? Because we're all in it together now, aren't we?" And she said, "No, you don't understand. This office also doubles as a fertility clinic, and there are women here who would be very upset by seeing your children." And I said, "Okay, I get it. Is this too real for what you're trying to sell here? Are you afraid somebody's going to come in and see my kids and just turn their Lululemon ass around and be like, 'Fuck it, I'll just buy a new house'?" Wasn't aware of the detail involved. So, I was sick, and while I was sick, my husband serenaded me with the compassionate song of, "Don't get me sick. No, really, don't get me sick." And I wanted to be like, why would I want to get you sick? Why would I want to make you any less efficient than you already are? Because I don't know what everyone else's home life is like, but in our house, like, my husband and I can get the same germ, like same strain and everything. Very different experience. Like, if you see a mom get sick, it's like watching some post-apocalyptic film where she's defying zombies and cannibals to get her kids where they need to be with just a thin film of sweat on her brow. But if you see her husband sick, it's like watching Passion of the Christ, but with way more crying. Just way more crying. Not surprisingly, with my boys, I'm very direct, and I've gone out of my way to make sure they're very comfortable with different anatomical terms. And so they're very comfortable talking about bodies, and whenever I tell them something they don't want to hear, like that it's bedtime or we have to go home now, their response is, "Oh yeah? Well, you have a vagina." And I'm always like, this is true. Doesn't invalidate anything that I just said, though. Like, unless I'm running for Congress, this is all still legit. One of my sons had a rough go in kindergarten, and I got a call from the teacher saying, he's having some attention issues, we need to address this. And I'm not a punitive person, so I took him to the Disney store, and I went in and I said, "So here's the deal. I want you to look around, pick anything you want in here, and if I hear that you had a good week, it's yours. So what do you want? And he said, I want the bell dress from Beauty and the Beast. And I was like, okay. And so I got it. And every time that week that he would act up, I would hold up the Disney bag and say, this dress is just for big boys. You may be a cross-dresser, but you will be a cross-dressing Rhodes Scholar. Education is key. The higher the GPA, the higher the heel. There's a wig in this for you, but you got to work it, okay? My oldest son, he overhears things and then repeats them at very inappropriate times. We're driving to school the other day, and he says to me, so I heard you and Dad are talking about having another kid. How's that going for you? And I said, if it happens, it happens. And if not, we're very happy with you and your brother. And his response was, I don't think you're trying hard enough. And it's a very sensitive subject. And my first response was to be like, I am trying very hard. I am having sex like a pirate whore. I have 2 apps on my phone that tell me when to fuck your dad. Back off. But I didn't say that. You can't. You just drink wine on the floor of the bathroom, and that's your coping mechanism. For me, the weirdest thing about parenting has been that it's the only job that I've ever had where there's no training whatsoever. Like, you just have to draw on your previous life experiences and hope that it gets you through whatever you're going through. Like, I didn't get a crash course in how to hang out with 5-year-olds all day. But I've hung out with drunk girls, and it's pretty much the same thing. They make you late for everything. They insist on wearing something ridiculous. And the night ends with some kind of drama surrounding a random tiara that no one came in with. And the whole car ride home is just like, are we going to McDonald's? Because you said we would. You said. You never let me throw up outside. I was in Scotland recently. It was very cool. I'd never been there before, and I loved it. I thought the buildings were gorgeous and the people were lovely. The only thing that was a little weird to me was that, I don't know if you know this, but Scotland has more redheads than any place else on Earth. So I had never felt less special in my life. Like, the whole country should just be called Buy Your Own Drink, Zoe, 'cause we're sick of you here. I'm a mom, and the strangest thing for me entering that phase of my life is that I had this assumption that everyone, once you became a parent, had like this common shared goal, right? And that would be this arena where there was no like haters, for lack of a better term. But I was so wrong, because there are so many people willing to like tear you apart from the very beginning. Like, there are people who give you shit for breastfeeding, okay? Like, they give you a hard time for being a mammal, basically. Like, and it was insane to me because I had been at parties where you could see more of a woman's breast behind a poor dress choice than you could behind an infant's head, but nobody cared. But if you were nursing, it was like somebody's radar went off, and they were like, is there a titty out and I'm not getting anything out of it? Are you serious? What, are you feeding somebody with that, you sicko? Don't you know they're meant to sell cars? That's what God intended them for. Another weird thing, And I don't know if anybody's talking about this. Do you know that no one has pubes anymore? They just don't. Like, they're like the polar bears. Like, nobody's talking about it. They're disappearing, and nobody's saying anything or how it affects our society as a whole. Like, and I get it. I do. No one wants, like, a Wookiee in their pants. I understand. But there should be a certain amount agreed upon that says, I am a mammal of consenting age. I think that would be nice. I've been married for 10 years. Which is why the pubic hair thing shocks me, because I've been out of the game for a while. But the 10-year anniversary, like, people talk about how there's the 50-year anniversary gift and all that. Like, what's the silver and the gold? Well, the 10, for me anyway, was the nudie pick year. That was the year when my husband wanted a nudie pick. But here's the thing. I'm not a nudie pick person. It makes me uncomfortable. But beyond that, I don't have a life. I have 2 small children, so, like, I don't have a life that lends itself to a nudie pick. Like, there's nothing in my landscape that would look sexy in the background. Like, am I going to take a picture of myself in line at Trader Joe's, being like, oh, I'm so naughty, and after this, I'm going to just go home and sprawl myself out on that big pile of unfolded laundry. It's just never going to get folded. I can't do that, you know? Like, and what happens to it? It goes to the cloud. And in my psyche, I'm like, okay, so my husband's been in the picture for 10 years. We're married. We got 2 kids. But what if he gets the nudie pic and he's like, psych, got what I wanted. I'm out. I don't need that in my life. My husband's from the South, and he does that thing that Southerners do where he acts like a normal person until he drinks, and then he becomes very Southern. Like, it's hard to go to parties with him because he'll have a drink, and whoever's next to him falls victim to what I call the Mark Twain effect. Like, he has a drink, and all of a sudden I hear, pull up a stump and sit a spell. You learn a lot growing up on a riverboat. And I have to go over and be like, hey, honey, 7:30 already. We gonna go home, get the kids to bed, or you gonna become a racist slave owner? Because the side that won the war wants to go home now, okay? Not surprisingly, I recently was on a wine tour. I got it as a gift because something about me says to people, she needs wine. And one thing I can say is, if you ever think to yourself, I have a shortage of pretentious bullshit in my life, go on a wine tour, because that's all it is. Like, why does wine get a pass? That's what I don't understand. Like, if you're in a bar and you see a guy talking about any other substance the way people talk about wine, that's a huge red flag. If there's a guy being like, this vodka pairs well with a frat boy and a Red Bull, you would know he had serious problems. But people talk like that about wine all the time, and they're just a connoisseur. Like, and what was weird to me is I told people that I was going on this wine tour, which is essentially just drinking for the weekend, and they acted like it was a legitimate adult activity. But nobody ever gets to be like, I'm going cocaine sniffing in Caracas this weekend. To the refined palate, you can tell this was smuggled rectally. Can you taste the fear? Yes? My husband's lovely, and he's from the South, and one of the things that happens when you marry someone from the South is you get Southern in-laws, which may be lovely people, and they are, but they say things to you that you know are English, but you don't understand. We went to visit, and I'm getting up in the morning, and my father-in-law's in the kitchen, and I said to him, hey, I just want to know what to dress the boys in. What's the temperature today? And he looks at me and he goes, It's hotter than two rats fucking in a wool sock. And I was like, so 70s? Like humid, right? Humid? Short sleeves. I had my family in town for the holidays, and they were visiting, and I took my brother to the drugstore to get some stuff that he'd left at home. And as we're walking around the personal care aisle, he announces to me and everyone else there, he says, "This isn't the personal care aisle. This is like the vagina aisle. Look at this. You guys have all these scented washes and lotions. We don't have any of that. That's not fair. We deserve a penis aisle." And I said, you don't have a penis aisle because the world is your penis aisle. Like, you don't have a penis aisle the way white people don't have a history month. It's not happening. Let go of that. When I was talking to somebody and they asked me why I started doing comedy, I didn't, like, most people start doing it when they're like in their 20s, and for me, I started doing it when I was older and had 2 kids. And part of it was I love my children and I love being a parent, but it was tremendously isolating for me. And I felt like everywhere that I looked and everyone that I talked to acted as though they knew exactly what they were doing. You know, they were like, "Oh, this is what we do, and of course my baby sleeps through the night, and he loves broccoli." And I was like, "Oh, what am I doing?" You know, like, everybody keeps acting like they have it all together. And to me, that was so stressful because nobody said, "I don't know what I'm doing. I just hope I'm getting it right." And so for me, doing stand-up was like a way to connect with adults. I never got to talk to adults anymore. I talk to kids all the time, and they don't listen, ever. So I got to go and talk about the things that, you know, it was the opposite of me being like, "I'm fine and everything's great." I got to stand up and be like, "Here's what's weird and broken about me. Can we all laugh about it?" And it was a good way to connect with other people, you know, with adults who would be like, "Oh my God, that's so true." And it was wonderful because you know, people were like, "Oh, that must be so scary to stand in front of a bunch of people you don't know and say all these deeply personal things about yourself." But for me, I was like, I have children. Like, that's scary. That's what you really get scared about, is like, I hope I'm doing this right. I hope I'm handling this the right way. But to get up in front of a bunch of people and be like vulnerable with them and talk to them about the things about yourself that make you feel insecure or scared or anything like that, you connect with them. And also for me, I feel like it takes the power away from those things. It's like, you don't scare me as much anymore. I laughed about you in front of a whole bunch of people. And sometimes I use situations like that where I feel disempowered or hurt, or if, you know, like in the parenting world, there are a lot of judgy, mean, there are a lot of lovely people, but there are a lot of judgy, mean people who feel like, you know, they're just mean girls that went underground for 8 years and then came back and had kids. And so when I find myself dealing with that, if I can make a joke out of it, I feel better. You know, I feel like if you can, it's like the thing about if you can find humor in any situation, you win. Where I'm like, how can I make this funny? How can I take the power away from this and give it back to me? I always think about the stand-up teacher that I had who had quoted and said, I'm probably going to butcher this, but he had said, if you can find the humor, or not if you can find the humor, he said that laughter is the sound of people realizing that they're not alone. And for me, that was incredibly true. And so I feel that way whenever I go and I do something, like when I do a show and something works and somebody comes up to me afterwards and says, "Oh, that thing you said, that's so true." And I'm like, "Oh, this is great. I'm connecting with other people." And in truth, I could probably use the microphone and the bouncer more at home with my children than I do even when I'm out at a show. you read all these parenting books, like you can tell a lot about a parent by the books that are on their shelves. And mine are like Parenting the Difficult Child, Parenting the Gifted Child, like the Zen of, motherhood, 50 Shades of Grey, like whatever does it for you. But one of the books that I was reading was about teachable moments with your kids and how to make a moment like not just something that's happening, but like where you are imparting some wisdom. And I find all too often that usually I'm the one who's learning something from my kids. My oldest son, I went on a field trip with his class. I was the chaperone, and I noticed at the beginning of the trip, and I had known a little before, that there was a new kid in his class who was sort of like trying to get into it with him. And I was seeing it that day, like as they lined up for the bus, the kid like cut in front of him in line and was like, I'm here. I'm going to stand here. And as we're getting in the bus, when we pick our seat, the kid slides into where we were going to sit. And he was like, this is where I'm sitting. And my son is like not made of that, like he doesn't get the motivation behind that kind of thing. So he was just like, yeah, if it's important to you, And so we make it through the field trip, and then they're all playing tag at the end. And my son runs up and he tags this kid, and he does the thing like, tag him on the shoulder, and he gives him the look like, you've been tagged, right? And the kid turns around and like open hand slaps my son in the face. And I just like, I was moving before I knew I was moving kind of thing. And I just like, I went from PTA to IRA in like a heartbeat. And I'm in this kid's face and I'm yelling and I'm like, you don't ever hit him. You don't ever even think about hitting him. Like, you say something right now or I'm going to get bigger and louder. And I'm doing exactly what I would have wanted someone to do for me. Like when I was little, I would have wanted somebody to like stand up for me and be like, yeah, like I've got her back sort of thing. And just as I'm doing that, I feel a tap on my shoulder and I hear my son's voice and he says, would you please sit down? And I turn and he goes, you're embarrassing me. You're yelling at a child in front of everybody. Will you please sit down? And I was like, I will sit down if you will sit down with me. So we go and we sit down, and I'm like, what was that? Has he done that before? And he said, not to me, but, he's got some things he's working on. And I'm, not feeling very generous or as evolved as he is at this moment. So I'm like, he's working on being a jerk. And he's like, Mom, that's not fair. And I was like, okay, so here's the deal. We're going to go over, and you're going to say to him, you don't ever put your hands on me again, and you owe me an apology. And he was like, I don't really want to do that. And I said, it doesn't matter. You teach other people how they can treat you, and you're going to teach him that he can't treat you like that. So we walk over to the kid, and my son starts the conversation by saying, do you remember when you hit me before? Like they're reminiscing about something that happened 5 minutes ago. And the kid goes, yeah. And my son says, well, that can't happen again. It's not okay. And maybe somebody did that to you, and that's why you thought it was okay, but that's not okay either. So this can't happen again. And the kid's like, okay. And as we're walking back to the car, I said to him, how are you feeling? And he goes, I feel sad. And I was like, really? You feel sad? Like you're not angry? I would be angry if I were you. And he was like, no, I feel sad because obviously someone must have hit him, and that's why he thought it was okay, and that makes me sad. And I was just sitting there like, I was going up to this kid like in this like Gangs of New York attempt to be like, don't hit my son. And instead, my son's like trying to heal all the wounds of humankind, like every wrong that's ever been done. And I remember feeling like I'm not qualified to be a parent. I'm not as evolved as my 8-year-old. Like he's 8 and he's like a better person than I'll ever be. So that was more of my teachable moment where I was learning from him, like he doesn't need the things that I need. Like he's got that. He knows that someone has his back, that there's like an unstable Irish mother in his corner. But it was nice to see this moment where I got to be like, okay, I'm clearly for however many times I'm late to school and someone has applesauce on their shirt, I've got this covered. And some days are about learning what I thought I knew, but I clearly didn't. But it's an awesome adventure and a really good education along the way. I had one awkward moment over the holidays where about 2 weeks before Christmas, I was getting my youngest to bed, and I get into bed, and I come out of the room, and my 9-year-old is like ominously waiting for me, and he says, I want to ask you a question, and I want you to tell me the truth. And he says, Santa, is he real? And I had to think fast, and I said, if you believe he's real, he's real. And he said, so no. And I was like, that is correct. However, this is not information for you to share. I'm just telling you this because we're alone together and I trust you. But now whenever we're alone together, he looks at me and he says, is there anything else you want to tell me? And a little part of me is tempted to be like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. Not a clue. You thought Santa was scary? What about that?